Welcome, everyone, and a particular special greetings to the folks at the Tri-Valley Chinese Bible Church of Pleasanton, California, who this message was expressly made for. However, my suspicion is if you're watching this on YouTube and you've heard me speak in person at one of the churches in the Bay Area, you might have heard this message before. But I think it takes on a special relevance to what we're going on, or what we're going through now, with the topic of racial inequality, racial injustice. And my hope is that you'll look at this message in a different light, because I will offer yet the perspective as we are going through what we are going through now. And my hope is that you are challenged to not only do something in terms of injustice, and hopefully in racial injustice, but also social injustice, and that it will challenge you to be able to see that the battle that we are experiencing is not against people, but it's higher than that. It's in the spiritual realm. God bless you. The title of this message is The Real Enemy. It's found in Luke chapter 11, verses 14 through 24. But before we read the passage, I'd like to play a little game of Jeopardy, just one question. And for those who have played Jeopardy before, you know that it starts with the answer and you provide the question. So the answer is, Jesus was accused to have cast out demons by this demonic name, also known as the Lord of the Flies. And if you have ever read the book, The Lord of the Flies, you know that the answer is Beelzebub. And here we have the question, actually, is who is Beelzebul, which is the same thing, depending on your Bible translation. So Beelzebub, Beelzebul, both correct answers. So now let's look at the passage. It says, "Now he was casting out a demon that was mute. When the demon had gone out, the mute man spoke, and the people marveled. But some of them said, he cast out demons by Beelzebul, the prince of demons, while others, to test him, kept seeking from him a sign from heaven. But he, knowing their thoughts, said to them, Every kingdom divided against itself is laid waste, and a divided household falls. And if Satan also is divided against himself, how will his kingdom stand? For you say that I cast out demons by Beelzebul. And if I cast out demons by Beelzebul, by whom do your sons cast them out? Therefore they will be your judges. But if it is by the finger of God that I cast out demons, then the kingdom of God has come upon you. When a strong man, fully armed, guards his own palace, his goods are safe. But when one stronger than he attacks him and overcomes him, he takes away his armor in which he trusted and divides his spoil. Whoever is not with me is against me, and whoever does not gather with me scatters." I think you, as well as I, have seen this passage used in a number of different ways. Our excuse or our justification to somehow faction out all those people who aren't just like us, that are not a part of our church or our brand of Christianity or whatever it might be. Because as you could see from the story, basically what happens is Jesus heals this person, and all the people that are watching him do this are saying, he must be doing this by a demon. Yet factioning or separating him out into what is their brand of belief. And Jesus goes on to say, if I'm doing it based on a devil, then what about the folks that you have great admiration for who are also healing people? Well, what are they doing about it? Well, is theirs also from the devil as well? And it's often the case, as we see in our society today, is we're so quick to label and brand people under different flavors or under different positions. And I think what Jesus was trying to do wasn't so much separating people out, and because we often look at that last verse of that passage where it says, well, if you're not for me, you're against me. And so we are on the Jesus side. Yet somehow we've segmented that Jesus side to be a lot more granular than what I wonder Jesus meant through this story. Notice that in the passage, he talks about the finger of God, that me doing what I just did, it's just a small sample of what God's power is all about. And then he goes on to this illustration about a strong man and saying that if a strong man is strong and has a great set of resources, yet someone stronger than him is able to overtake him, he takes everything that he has. And I don't know specifically, and as I look at research behind it, you can only take the story for what it is. But I wonder if we actually are not referring to the strong man in the right way. That really the strong man isn't us being overtaken by an enemy. Rather, I wonder if the strong man that's being talked about here is actually Satan's forces, and saying that we have a power that is far greater than what Satan can stand against us. And not only can we take his power, we take everything that he has as well. And it's with that context that I wonder if this passage is not talking so much about the positional, the group-wise factions that we have in the physical realm, but actually looking at things from the spiritual realm. So as we start to analyze this passage, I see the first observation as this, that there are clearly two sides. There's the perspective that wrongly accused Jesus of being allied with evil. But within that perspective of accusing Jesus of being aligned with evil is, I wonder if the true meaning of this is that they were wrongly withholding trust unless a physical sign from God was demonstrated. Here they were watching Jesus heal these people, and they were saying, well, I need a sign from God to be able to see that Jesus is on God's side. It's almost the doubting Thomas syndrome. I gather that from this passage, these two verses, where Jesus says, and if I cast out demons by Beelzebul, by whom do your sons cast them out? Therefore they will be your judges. But if it is by the finger of God that I cast out demons, then the kingdom of God has come upon you. Again, he was showing to them, hey, what's it going to take before you understand that I truly am on God's side? And if I am on God's side, how much greater power that is, and the fact that the kingdom of God then can be revealed to you. The other observation that I see also has two sides. And though it seems obvious, it deserves being visualized or displayed here. And that is, there's the side that demons are casted out by Beelzebul. Probably goes to mention then that demons are casted out by God. And the point that's being made here is that you can't be both. You can't both cast out demons by Beelzebul and cast out demons by God. Notice what it says in verse 23. Whoever is not with me is against me, and whoever does not gather with me scatters. The point behind here really is to say that you can't be both. You're either on Jesus' side or you're not. Yet often we define Jesus' side as being very narrow. Allow me to give an example, and maybe it's not a good one, but I remember as a young Christian that there would often be discussions about Martin Luther King Jr. And often those discussions led to the fact, well, he's not a Christian like we are. And often that is a common mistake on our part, in that we spend too much time on trying to faction out Who is the real followers of Jesus? What it says here is either you're for me or you're against me. And rather than spending all our time trying to divide out the Jesus side, we need to be able to clearly understand and identify what's that other side. So even if we were to lump all the Jesus folks together on the one side and say anyone that's not on the Jesus side is on the enemy side, well, who really is that enemy? Who's the enemy that we can look around us and say, that's the group of people that are the enemy? Is it really the folks that are the white supremacists, or the folks that are the looters, or the folks that have somehow bullied and meted out injustice to some of these folks that were disadvantaged, such as our African and American colleagues and friends? Who are these people that are the enemy in our world today? And as I was pondering this whole question of who is the real enemy, it just happened to be during a time where I was watching a whole bunch of movies. It was probably a few years back. Many of you may remember these movies, and I'd like to be able to walk you through them because I think they have a telling theme that is common amongst all the movies and helps us to be able to reveal the real enemy. The first movie is one in the upper left. It's Hunger Games Mockingjay Part 2. Now, for those who haven't been following the Hunger Games series, basically Hunger Games was this futuristic movie where there was this the subject, the protagonist is the story. The subject of the story really is this lady Katniss Everdeen, who has the bow and arrow. And basically what we see is there is clearly divided those that are on the good side and those that are on the evil side. And Katniss, of course, is fighting for the folks on the good side, the poor people, and those that are oppressed. And their leader, their president, is a lady named President Coin. And the evil leader on the other side is a guy named President Snow. And that's all you really need to know if you don't know anything about the story. But the interesting thing that happened in this movie is that towards the end of the movie, Katniss Everdeen finds out that President Coin is not the good guy she thought she was. Actually, the good lady that she thought she was. And the surprising thing, to jump to the end of the movie, was that she basically kills the good president, President Coin, as well as the other folks end up killing the bad president, President Snow. Interesting twist in a movie where you thought you knew who was the good guys and who were the bad guys. Jump over to the next movie that's found here on the right side, in the upper right corner, The Man from U.N.C.L.E. This is, for those of you old enough to remember, this was actually taken from a TV series where the Man from U.N.C.L.E., which is a secret organization that is run by the government of the United States. The guy that is played, Napoleon Solo, is a guy named Henry Cavill. You know him best because he was also the guy that played Superman. And you can see there's the other guy that's listed in this picture, which is the one with the gun and the hat. He actually is a Russian spy. And as we've played out in our world today, Americans and Russians continue to have a political animosity for each other and continue to accuse each other of spying on each other's countries. And so here we see the situation where these two spies are working together. Okay, and originally they're working against each other, but only to find out that they work together at the end of the movie. Quite an interesting twist on what we would perceive as who is good and who is evil. Now follow me down to the bottom left corner. This movie called Trumbull. It's about a guy named Dalton Trumbull who was a movie script writer. So he's the guy that writes all the scripts for movies that would eventually be published and produced and made into a movie. And of course, he had his movie writer buddies, screenwriter buddies, and they were part of the Screenwriters Guild. And at the time, this era that Dalton Trumbull was a movie screenwriter, what eventually happened is there was some words, some theories that came out that some of these screenwriters were embedding communist ideology within the movies that they were writing. And they somehow identified them and branded them as part of the Communist Party. And because Dalton Trumbull was such a famous movie scriptwriter, they would ask him to take a side. And at the time, he said, "I'm not going to speak." And of course, by not speaking, he was automatically branded as a communist. He could not write any more movies, or nobody would accept any of his movies anymore. And I think towards one part of the movie in the end, he reveals to everyone, "I am not communist, but I didn't like how they were treating my fellow colleagues who did align with the Communist Party." And so basically he took it, even though he wasn't one himself. He took the penalty that he really didn't deserve. Again, we thought we knew who was good and who was evil. And by the end of the movie, we actually find out it's a far different story. The final movie that I want to share with you, and that I had viewed during this time as I was trying to mull over this idea of the real enemy, was this movie called The Bridge of Spies. It actually parallels a real story that happened in the end of the 50s, early 60s, about a guy named Gary Powers, who was a spy for the Americans. And again, here is that Russian-American theme that is going on here. And in this movie, which was starred by Tom Hanks plays this lawyer who represents a Russian spy, which they catch in the end of the 50s. Now, because he's American himself, he's doing this out of loyalty and patriotism to the United States. But you could already imagine that as much as he's representing this Russian spy, he's doing it for the purpose of saving his country and hopefully retrieving the US spy. But throughout the movie, what we see is he builds this relationship with this Russian spy. He finds out about his family. He finds out about his situation. And at the end of the movie, we see that as he passes this Russian spy, because they make an exchange for the American spy at the, I want to say, Gleinecke Bridge. It's a bridge in Germany. As he's making this exchange, he finds himself emotionally tied, relationally tied to this Russian spy, because now he knows who he is. He finds out he's a normal human being just like him. He has a family just like him. And he knows that as he passes him over, this Russian spy is going to get killed by the folks on the Russian government. And so whereas in the beginning of the movie, we see that he doesn't even like this guy. At the end of the movie, what we see is that he is so relationally tied and just disheartened by what he has to do with turning this man over basically to his death. What did we learn from all four of these movies? Well, this is what I learned, is that often we think the enemy is the enemy. Until we get to the end of the story or more is revealed to us, and who we thought the enemy was isn't the enemy after all. The enemy isn't really the enemy when we reveal more about the story. So that gets us back to the question, who is the real enemy? Who are the people that are on the opposite side of Jesus? If we were to look around our world today, is it really those people that are instituting evil, that are administering evil all around our world? Is that the enemy? And I would like to share with you that the enemy is not a group of people. The enemy is evil itself. What does evil make us do? Well, first of all, evil makes us desensitized to people. You may not recognize this man unless you're a fan of the ESPN 30 for 30 series because he was featured. His name is Steve Bartman. He's a Chicago Cubs fan. And what we know of his story is that several years ago, when the Chicago Cubs, this was prior to them actually winning a World Series, for many years they could not win anything. You know, there was the term that is used for their consecutive losses, not being able to get to any kind of championship game or to win a championship, is what's called the curse of the Billy Goat. And that phrase came from a story in that long time ago, that when they were allowed to bring farm animals to the baseball game, that a guy, a Chicago Cubs fan, had brought his Billy Goat into the stadium. And all the fans complained and made him leave the stadium, leave the game. And his final words as he left was, "Dem Cubs ain't never gonna win again." And they never did until they finally won the World Series, which was actually not that long ago, a few years ago. So this had been going on for many years. Well, the Chicago Cubs at one point actually did get, and I want to say it's within the year early 2000s. They actually did get to the national championship, and they were within, I think it was a strike away or an out away from winning the championship. And what had ended up happening was there was a foul ball that was hit by the other team. Moises Alou was a left fielder. If you know anything about baseball, he was going towards left field, and it was towards the wall, by the line, reached up with his glove, and there was Steve Bartman, Chicago Cubs fan, who sees this ball come towards him. And while everyone is saying, "Don't touch it, let the outfielder Moises Alou catch it," he reaches up and attempts to catch the ball. Of course, he obstructs Moises Alou. Moises Alou doesn't catch the ball. He doesn't catch the ball. Steve Bartman doesn't catch the ball either. And in this instance, as the ball drops and he misses it, Moises Alou slams his mitt and he looks up at Steve Bartman and says, "How could you do that? And prohibit me from catching the ball?" Because that would have been the game. What ended up happening is the Chicago Cubs lost. That the other team ended up scoring several more runs. They won that game. The opposing team, they won that game. They won, I think it was the next two games, and the Chicago Cubs were yet once again deprived of their opportunity to win the championship. Well, in that game, it was described this way, that when Steve Bartman did what he did, and the result of what had ended up happening, that the evil, the ugliness of the world was highlighted. Steve Bartman was highlighted on the news about how he obstructed the foul ball, and what they end up having to do was they had to somehow escort him out of the stadium, dress him up in other clothes, take him from Wrigley Field, which is the ballpark that Chicago plays in. And from that point on, he never was able to go back into watch a Chicago Cubs game ever again. Not only that, but he was basically a recluse. He lived very privately and pretty much in seclusion for the remainder of time, until the time, I believe, even when the Cubs won the World Series, that he was still this very secretive person. And from that experience, we see the ugliness of what we can do and how we can judge people. My point is this: there's evil in each one of us. I remember that instance. And I remember saying, what a dummy of a guy to try to reach up and grab a foul ball when this truly could have been the championship for the Chicago Cubs. Many of us forget that Steve Bartman is a human being, and he paid that consequence with the secrecy that he now lives. He was totally devastated, and what we discover is it really wasn't his fault. Now, you can't really see it by this picture, but he was actually wearing headphones, and it was a tape delay, so he had no idea what was going on. He was so engrossed in the game based on the narration that was going on in his headphones that when he sees something in the air, he just automatically reacted. It really wasn't so much Steve Bartman's fault. Yet that's the ugliness and the evil that we have within each one of us. Evil desensitizes us to what other people are going through, like Steve Bartman. And evil also makes us attack the person and not the problem. So many times we've seen in our situation and society amongst leaders as well as people, we often attack people rather than attacking the problem. I kind of wonder if we actually agree more with people than we do disagree. And that rather we often are opposing people because we're attacking their person. There's a passage that speaks to this, and it's found in Proverbs chapter 15, verse 1, where it says, "A soft answer turns away wrath, but a harsh word stirs up anger." Now, I did a little experiment being a foolish young teenager as I was when I used to work at a shoe store, and I thought for one day I'm going to be harsh with people. So rather than being friendly and engaging, asking them, "May I help you?" I was going to be what other people have been to me in the past, and that is the angry salesman to say, "What do you want? Okay, is that it?" And it was amazing how many people were so harsh with me when I was first harsh with them. I'll never do that experiment again. But it further plays out, at least for me to be able to share it with you today, that truly a harsh answer does stir up anger. And really, it is a soft answer that diffuses that anger and tension. Nowadays, because we are sheltered in place, I have the privilege of watching other people speak. I'll watch as many as 2 to 3 church messages on a Sunday. And I was so appreciative of what this one pastor, Pastor Chad Veach, he's down in Southern California, pastor of the Zoe Church, said. It was so profound. It characterizes what we're seeing in our society today, and that is hurt people hurt people. That it's people that are hurt that go around hurting other people. Anger meets more anger. Violence meets more violence. So my hope is that we would learn that we can be the difference when we learn to act a different way. And finally, evil makes us misassign ourselves as being righteous. Did you catch what happened in the passage where those folks were looking at Jesus and saying, "He must be doing this by the devil"? Basically, they were misassigning themselves as being more righteous than Jesus. Look at him. He must be doing this by the devil. And often that's what evil makes us do, is that we think we're right in our anger. We're right in our getting back at someone else. And that somehow has assigned us this false sense of being righteous. What's it say in this passage? While others to test him kept seeking from him a sign from heaven. Those people that were testing him were saying that he was of the devil. They were saying, I don't see it, God hasn't shown me as the righteous person. So if I don't see it, he ain't it. I share with you this passage. It's found in Judges chapter 16, verse 6. It was talking about that time when Israel did not have a king. It says, in those days there was no king in Israel. Everyone did what was right in his own eyes. Everyone had their own definition for righteousness. Isn't that what we're seeing today? Is that everybody has their own definition of righteousness besides what we find as biblical values and truths from his word. Now, how can we practice righteousness in opposition to evil? Well, for those of you who know the three monkeys, perhaps this is a way that we can practice it, that we see no evil, we hear no evil, and we speak no evil. But I'd like to be able to share with you one more monkey. And before I do, I want to share with you an article. As you can see, this article is dated April 29, 2020, so it is fairly recent. And it's actually a German article. They were talking about something that had happened, and this was in my original research that I had this message for, was that there was a factory in Bangladesh 7 years ago. And in that factory in Bangladesh, 1,100 garment workers lost their lives. Thousands more were injured. And it was all because of the poor, inhumane working conditions that they had for them. Not just were they underpaid, but we also saw just terrible things that were inhumane, that deprived them of their human rights, basically not allowing them to go to the restroom, working them while they were sick or they would lose their job. There were all these pressures that they had imposed on these people, basically making them into slaves. And what we discovered in this more recent article, it was saying that there are actually 4 other countries that also have similar inhumane conditions for factory garment workers, such as what we saw in Bangladesh. And that is Bulgaria, Croatia, Serbia, and Ukraine. And at least for German retailers, they're speaking out to say, this exploitation that is happening in Europe, we're not going to stand for it anymore. We're not going to buy from those factories that sell clothes or that make clothes in these countries that offer these terrible working conditions for their staff. And I wonder if we've taken up that same charge to be able to say not only that we hear no evil, speak no evil, see no evil, but that there's a fourth monkey that we need to also consider. And that is spend no evil. Whereas we'll get an opportunity very soon to be able to go back and shop once again. I know that's going to be exciting. Many of you are probably already shopping online. And one of the things that I would challenge you to do is to defend ourselves against evil, to uphold righteousness by saying, I'm not going to spend on evil anymore. To take the extra time as you're looking at clothes to perhaps look at the tags and find out where these clothes are made from, and do your research to find out more about what are the conditions of those factories that are producing these types of clothes in the respective countries. I think you'll be surprised and disheartened by the fact that you're wearing clothes that were basically made by people who have basically sacrificed their lives and become slaves to these factories. We need to be able to stand up and stand against these types of things, these injustices, not just racial injustice, which I fully agree with. The African American and particularly black males have had it so hard, and there are many injustices that should have been taken care of by now, but haven't. So the demonstrations, the highlighting of these issues to me are valid. But there are other issues as well that we need to be able to stand against. And that is social injustice in addition to racial injustice. And that is when we see situations like this, when we buy and are consumers of goods that really are made in slave situations, slave-like situations, just like we're trying to come out of the slavery situation that our African American friends and brothers and sisters are also trying to struggle with. I found this passage quite interesting and have still not completely unpacked it, but allow me to give you at least my version of how this is analyzed and maps out for me. Notice that it says, there are 6 things that the Lord hates, 7 that are an abomination to him: haughty eyes, a lying tongue, and hands that shed innocent blood, a heart that devises wicked plans, feet that make haste to run to evil, a false witness who breathes out lies, and one who sows discord among brothers. As we consider who's the enemy in our lives, who was the enemy before you walked in, before you viewed this message today, I'd like you to take this into consideration, this passage, because notice it says there are 6 things, and we can count out the 6 things, and then it says, but the 7th is an abomination to him. Now, the 6 verses, the 7, still is of mystery to many Bible scholars. But allow me to be able to give you this perspective, is that these 6 things are bad things. But it's the 7th that God really, really, really hates. And what is that 7th? It's when one person sows discord among other brothers. It's that person that tries to divide other people, that tries to pit people against each other. That's the thing God hates the most. Look at this passage in that perspective, and I think you'll see what is the evil that we probably do amongst each other and how we need to be able to unpack that for ourselves. So I've come to this conclusion, that to be for Jesus is to be against evil, not against people specifically, but against the evil that comes out of every one of us. So my hope is that you think very differently about who is your enemy. And just like the movies that I viewed and shared with you, the enemy isn't really the enemy after all that I thought he was. Rather, the enemy is evil itself. And whether you can do so in groups or in your own individual study, my hope is to make this message more applicable to you, is to think about these discussion questions. Number 1, think of who has been your enemy, whether currently or in the past. What are some characteristics of evil that made this person your enemy? How has evil caused you to think of your enemy as less of a person? Remember, evil desensitizes us from people. And then, what are some ways that we can avoid buying evil? So in concluding this message, my hope is that you see the real enemy is a spiritual battle. It's a battle of Jesus versus evil. But that doesn't mean that there aren't things of a physical battle that we must also fight against. And that is, we need to fight against injustice that happens all around us. I've given you an example of social injustice, where we need to be able to say, we're not going to buy those things where people's human rights have been deprived in some form. But also in racial injustice that we've seen as well. There are things that we have, whether we're Asian Americans or whatever our privilege has been, that puts us ahead of other people. And we need to continue to continue to be conscious of the fact that maybe we've had some advantages that others haven't, but also to find ourselves as being responsible to say, how can we help somebody who hasn't had that advantage that we have? How can we stand up for them? My hope is that the enemy becomes a different enemy for you, that we continue to fight against evil and to fight alongside what Jesus has for us, because his power is just a small finger of God in what can be done in our lives. May God continue to use you and keep you safe during this time.